We're not in a global finance panic. Right now we may be heading for one. Let me talk about that separately. We're not in one right now, we are in a recession. It looks, the US is definitely in a recession. Right now we had 2 consecutive quarters of declining GDP. First quarter, second quarter, well, that's a recession. It may be prolonged and it may get worse. Europe is in a recession based on the latest data. Japan is in a recession. China looks like they are in a recession. They reported their most recent growth figures of 0.4%. For the second quarter, not 4%, but 0.4% versus compound growth of over 10% for about 30 years. And they lie. So if they're admitting 0.4%, I have to believe that's negative. So we're really looking at a global recession now, a recession or even a depression. Which it may turn into is not the same as a financial panic. You can have panic without recessions. We saw that in 1998. 1987 you can have recessions. Without panics, we saw that in 1990, 2020. Sometimes they do go together. 2008 was an example of both. A severe recession and a severe financial panic. But I would keep those separate. Because if we're not in a global financial panic, then we don't necessarily have dollar buying. Because of get me out of everything else. The dollar generally does rally in a financial panic. That's correct, and it does so because people want the best assets they can find. They are like, the best description I've ever heard of a financial panic is everybody wants his money back. Doesn't matter what you're in, get me out, sell it. Whatever, I want dollars. Well, when you get the dollars, you got to go buy something. So you can leave it in the bank, but banks are risky. The problem in 2008 is the banks were failing, and that didn't quite happen in 2020, but it absolutely happened in 2008. So they buy treasury bills, they buy treasury notes. They are the safest assets. They may not want them for long, but you can buy a 2-year treasury note or a 6-month treasury bill. You're not in it that long, and your money's safe. So, there is demand for dollars from around the world to buy that really good collateral because it looks like a safe haven relative to everything else that's falling apart. That's not exactly what's going on today. But it's related, but we are in recession. Now, the recession should damp down the inflation. It hasn't yet. Inflation's high. There's no question about it. We see it in the data. You see it at gas pump. You see it at the store. But that may trend a lot lower very quickly, but not for good reasons. In other words, you say, well, what's the Fed doing about inflation? Well, they really can't do anything about. The inflation is coming from the supply side. Inflation can come from a lot of places, but 2 places in particular, the supply side and the demand side. Supply side inflation is when there are shortages, there are bottlenecks, there's supply chain dysfunction. People run out of stuff. There's not enough fertilizer, not enough water, not enough truck drivers, ports are clogged. You can't get the inputter to make item B, so you got to shut down assembly line because you can't get, titanium from Russia to build being aircraft, but supply chains are breaking down in many different respects, and price got up as a result. But the other kind of inflation is called cost push inflation. The other kind of inflation is demand and pull inflation. This is when consumers change their behavior. They get in their head, say, hey, prices are going up. They're getting out of control. I better go out and buy that thing. And this is what we lived through in the 1970s. And I remember it very well. If you were going to buy whatever, a refrigerator, a new car, a dishwasher, whatever, and you'd say to yourself, I better go buy it today, because if I wait 3 months, it's going to be higher, or 6 months, it's going to be a lot higher. So, of course, that just pulls demand forward, and it creates excess demand relative to supply. And the prices do go up, and it feeds on itself. Next thing you know, bosses are handing out raises because of inflation, and people just spend more, etc. The Fed can do something about demand and pull inflation. They can destroy them, and by raising interest rates, raising mortgage rates, credit cards rates, and everything else, they can't do anything about supply inflation. The supply chain inflation, cost push inflation, they can't do anything about it. The Fed doesn't drill for oil. The Fed doesn't drive a truck. The Fed doesn't run a cargo line. The Fed doesn't mine, titanium in Russia. They can't do anything about any of those things. Inflation means prices are going up. But if they're going up for that reason, two things are true. One, Fed can't do anything about it. Two, it will probably run its own course in the sense that, if prices go higher, there's going to be a lot less discretionary income. You still got to put gas in your car and still got to put food on the table. If those two things have doubled in price, and they have, then you have that much less left over for anything else. You'll say, well, I'm going to skip the vacation, skip the concert, skip the restaurant, a lot of things, new furniture. I'm not going to buy any of these things because all my money is going to buy gas and food. So you still get the gas and food, but not more. You just pay more, and the value of your dollar goes down, real wages hold down, and you're not spending money on anything else. That will put the economy in recession real fast. That's happening. I mean, we're in a recession. I already said that, but it will get worse now. Here comes the Fed. Right. Always daylight and a dollar short, or maybe too many dollars, but they always get it wrong. This is my point. So, what are they doing? Well, they're saying inflation in the numbers. They don't really seem to distinguish between supply side and demand side, and they go into the Volcker playbook. Raise rates, raise them, raise them, raise them, raise them, raise them. That can get inflation under control, but only at the cost of a much worse recession, high unemployment, business failures, people out of work. I say, who cares what the price of gas is if you're sitting home unemployed? The Bretton Woods institutions are still around. The World Bank and does what it was always supposed to do. The World Trade Organization is bigger and more powerful, but it does what it was supposed to do. The one that's changed the most is the International Monetary Fund, because we don't need swing loans for deficit problems anymore. You just devalue your currency, but they do make loans. Usually they are highly political, highly selective. And they do kind of work around the edges of global finance crises, but that really falls back on the Fed and the other central banks. So, we're still in an age of Bretton Woods. Peg all currencies to the US dollar. And then the US dollar was pegged to gold at $35 an ounce. Now, by extension, or transitive law, if you want to use some 6th grade math, you were kind of pegged to gold because you were pegged to the dollar and the dollar was pegged to gold. But technically you were pegged to the dollar. That made the dollar the kind of global hegemonic currency, if you will, but also left the UK extremely vulnerable because they had issued a lot of pound sterling notes denominated in sterling to the Commonwealth countries. Australia, Canada, India at the time was still part of the British Empire, etc. They were technically redeemable into gold. But there's no way that the UK that much gold, it wasn't even close, but by diminishing the role of sterling and elevation in the role of the dollar, highlighting sterling's vulnerable to a run on gold, exacerbated economic tensions with everybody, including Canada, Australia, and a lot of the African members of the Commonwealth. But coming out of it, you did have a world where the only currency pegged to gold was the dollar and everybody else gas pegged to the dollar. Now, why did they do it? What way? The answer was that they felt that other currencies might run into difficulties, trade deficits, imbalance of payments, etc., and might have to devalue. Now, they didn't want anyone to devalue. That wasn't necessarily the plan, but realistically, they thought it might happen again. That was one of the problems of the 1920s. 1930s, that devaluing against gold was a total crack-up. It usually came hand in glove with the banking panic, as it did in the UK in 1931. So they felt that if you could modulate that process, the dollar was always pegged to gold. That was the anchor of the whole system. But if you ran into trade deficit problems, there was a swing lender. The swing lender was the International Monetary Fund. Thank you for watching this documentary. We hope you found it insightful and informative. We believe that through the power of storytelling, we can shed light on important issues and inspire change. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and share it with your friends and family. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. We have more documentaries coming your way, and we would love for you to be a part of our community. We want to hear from you. Let us know in the comments what you thought of this documentary, and what other topics you would like us to cover in the future. Thank you again for your support, and we'll see you in the next video.